Good evening all, and welcome back to Farcical Fears. This is the last photo taken before he disappeared. Look at the reflection. A man lived in their closet for 3 weeks, watching them sleep. This deck doesn't exist on blueprints, but he has photos proving it's real. Something swam in the pool without breathing for 7 minutes straight. The captain was trafficking humans, and they locked up anyone who found out. The ship vanished into green fog for 18 hours and ended up 400 miles off course. She appears in 89 photos, but she's not on the passenger list. He photographed his own disappearance. They covered up 23 deaths and called it food poisoning. He murdered his wife, collected $2 million, and walked free. Her body was never found. 30 million passengers board cruise ships every year. Hundreds go missing. These are the true stories cruise lines tried to bury. Some involve cover-ups. Some involve things that shouldn't exist. All of them are documented. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Farcical Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. And what happened in cabin 847 is where this nightmare begins. Diane opened the closet and saw the panel was already open. Story 1. The stowaway in cabin 847. Diane opened the closet and saw the panel was already open. Behind it, a cramped space barely 3 feet wide. A makeshift bed, food wrappers, and hundreds of photos scattered across the floor. Photos of her family, sleeping, eating, showering, her daughter's face in every single one. But this wasn't a random break-in. This was something far more calculated. 3 days earlier, the Morrison family had boarded a Caribbean cruise for spring break. Diane, her husband Robert, and their 2 kids, ages 8 and 10. Cabin 847. Interior room. Budget-friendly. They were thrilled. Second night aboard, their daughter Lily said something strange at breakfast. "The man in the closet told me bedtime stories last night." Diane and Robert laughed it off. Overactive imagination. The ship was massive. Lily was overwhelmed. But that night, Lily said it again. And this time, she knew details she shouldn't know. The man told her where they lived. He knew their cat's name. He knew Diane's maiden name. Robert checked the closet. Nothing. Just clothes and suitcases. They dismissed it. But the next morning, something was wrong. Food missing from their mini fridge. Diane's toiletries rearranged. Someone had showered in their bathroom while they slept. And that's when Robert noticed something that made his blood run cold. The towels were damp, but they'd all showered the night before. Someone else had been in here. Recently. Robert called security. 2 officers arrived within minutes. Standard sweep. They checked under beds, behind curtains. Then one officer noticed the closet panel. The back wall looked off. He pressed it. It swung open. What they found inside changed everything. A hollow space behind the cabin wall. A blanket. Pillow. Empty water bottles. Snack wrappers dating back 2 weeks. And the photos. Hundreds of them. The family sleeping. Lily in the bathtub. Diane changing clothes. All taken with a telephoto lens through the closet gap. But what security found next made them call for backup immediately. Because the photos were just the beginning. A journal, detailed logs, times the family left the cabin, what they wore, what they ate, where they went. Plans for the next phase. Security sealed the room, interviewed the family separately, pulled security footage. The man had been living in that space for 3 weeks. Not just in their cabin. He'd been rotating between 5 different cabins, all with families, all with young daughters. And then they discovered who he was. Former crew member fired 8 months prior for inappropriate behavior toward passengers. He knew the ship's blind spots, the maintenance tunnels, the hollow wall spaces used for pipes and wiring. He'd snuck aboard at port using a stolen crew ID, had been living in the walls ever since, moving cabin to cabin, watching, documenting, waiting. But what happened next is why this story haunts investigators to this day. They arrested him at port. Federal Falwingsu. Charges: breaking and entering, stalking, endangering minors. But here's the thing. His lawyer found a technicality. The ship's security footage had gaps. Timestamps didn't match. Chain of custody broken. Judge dismissed key evidence. He was released pending trial. Trial kept getting delayed. Witnesses were cruise passengers scattered across different states. Coordination fell apart. 2 years later, charges were dropped entirely. The Morrison family still receives letters. No return address. Postmarked from different cities. Inside are photos of their new house, the one they moved to after the cruise. Photos of Lily at her new school. Photos taken from a distance. Recent photos. And at the bottom of each letter, the same handwritten message. I still tell the best bedtime stories. The man's current location is unknown. The cruise line settled with the Morrison family for an undisclosed amount. NDA attached. The ship still operates under a different name. They've sealed the wall spaces, or so they claim. But 3 months ago, another family reported the same thing. Cabin 627. Their daughter said a man in the walls told her stories. Security found nothing. The family was labeled paranoid. They were offered a room upgrade and drink vouchers. But when they got home and reviewed their vacation photos, they saw something in the background. A face. In the closet. Barely visible. But there. Watching. Always watching. Story 2. Deck 13 doesn't exist. Trevor stood in the hallway staring at cabin door 1347. The number was rusted, weathered, like it hadn't been opened in decades. He reached for the handle. It was ice cold, and when he touched it, he heard breathing on the other side. Heavy, wet, not human. But according to the ship's blueprints, he shouldn't even be standing there. 4 nights earlier, Trevor had boarded a Mediterranean cruise. Solo trip. Needed to clear his head after a bad breakup. He'd been drinking heavily at the casino. Around 2 a.m., stumbling back to his cabin on deck 9, he called the elevator. Doors opened. He stepped inside, hit the button for 9. The elevator lurched upward, then stopped. The doors opened, but the floor displays showed something impossible. No number, just a blank screen flickering. He stepped out. The hallway was wrong. Dim emergency lighting, rusted walls. The carpet was torn, stained with something dark. The smell hit him immediately. Rotting metal and decay. He turned to go back to the elevator. The doors had already closed. He pressed the call button. Nothing. Dead. And that's when he realized he wasn't alone. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Slow, deliberate. But when he looked, nobody was there. Cabin doors lined both sides, numbers in the 1300s. But the ship only had 12 passenger decks. This was deck 13, the deck that doesn't exist. He pulled out his phone. No signal. Battery draining rapidly, 47% to 12% in seconds. He started taking photos anyway. Evidence. Proof he wasn't losing his mind. What his camera captured would later make experts question everything. He walked the corridor. Every cabin door had a name placard. Faded, old-fashioned typography. Names that sounded vintage. 1940s era. He tried door handles, all locked, except one. Cabin 1347. It opened with a rusty creak. Inside was a fully furnished cabin. Bed made, luggage on the floor. clothes in the closet, like someone had just stepped out. But everything was covered in dust, decades of dust. Then he saw the calendar on the wall. April 1983. His phone suddenly buzzed. 1 bar of signal. He ran into the hallway. The lights began flickering faster. The footsteps were closer now, coming from both directions. He found a service stairwell. Door marked emergency use only, deck 12. He threw it open and ran down, burst through a door into the main ship corridor. Bright lights, passengers walking, normal. He was on deck 14, not 12. Security found him 20 minutes later, incoherent, hyperventilating. But what happened next changed everything. They took him to medical, checked him for alcohol poisoning, asked what drugs he'd taken. He showed them his phone, the photos. Security's faces went pale. They confiscated his phone immediately, claimed it was protocol for investigation. When they returned it 6 hours later, the photos were gone. All of them. He insisted he'd backed them up to the cloud. They showed him his cloud account. Empty. No photos, no data, no evidence. Except for one thing they missed. Trevor had texted 2 photos to his brother before his battery died. His brother screenshot them before they disappeared. When researchers enhanced those images, they found something impossible. The cabin numbers matched passenger manifests from 1983. A sister ship, MS Atlantica, disappeared during a storm. 400 passengers, no survivors, no wreckage ever found. The ship vanished completely. And the names on those cabin door placards? They matched the passenger list exactly. The cruise line denied everything, showed Trevor the blueprints. No deck 13. Structurally impossible. But maritime historians confirmed something disturbing. The ship Trevor was on was built using salvaged materials. After the MS Atlantica disappeared, the company scrapped the investigation, reused parts for new vessels, hull sections, steel beams, entire corridor modules. They built his ship using pieces of the one that vanished. Trevor never cruised again. But he checks the photos his brother saved every single day. Because when you zoom into the darkness at the end of that hallway, there's something there. A figure, translucent, standing in the shadows. And in the reflection of cabin 1347's door handle, you can see Trevor's face. But behind him, dozens of other faces. Pale, hollow-eyed, mouths open like they're screaming. The passengers of the MS Atlantica, still trapped on deck 13, the deck that doesn't exist. The deck that was never supposed to be found. Story 3. The Midnight Swimmer. Claudia watched the swimmer complete another lap underwater. 5 minutes now. No surfacing, no air. Impossible. She stood at the edge of the adult pool on deck 12, her towel wrapped tight around her shoulders, counting the seconds. The figure moved with fluid precision, back and forth, never breaking the surface. But it wasn't moving like a human. The motion was too smooth, too effortless. And that's when she realized that something was very wrong. It was 2 a.m. on a Pacific crossing. Claudia couldn't sleep. Insomnia had plagued her the entire voyage. She'd come up to the pool for some air, maybe a quick swim to tire herself out. The deck was empty, just her and the sound of waves against the hull. She'd slipped into the water, done a few laps, then climbed out to rest. That's when she noticed she wasn't alone anymore. Someone else was in the pool, swimming laps, underwater. She'd been watching for 5 minutes, then 6, then 7. No human could hold their breath that long. She called out, "Hey, are you okay?" No response. The figure kept swimming. She could see its silhouette through the illuminated water. Human-shaped but wrong somehow. The proportions were off. Arms too long, movement too fluid. She backed away from the edge, heart pounding. Pulled out her phone and called ship security. 2 officers arrived within minutes. By the time they got there, she was trembling. "There's someone in the pool," she told them. "They've been underwater for at least 10 minutes. But what happened next made her question everything. The officers looked. The pool was empty, just clear, still water. "Ma'am, there's nobody here," one of them said. Claudia insisted, pointed at the water. "I watched them for 10 minutes. They never came up for air." The officers exchanged glances, asked if she'd been drinking. She hadn't. They checked the pool anyway. Nothing. Then one of them suggested reviewing the security footage. They took her to the security office, pulled up the camera feed from Deck 12. The footage showed Claudia swimming alone, getting out, sitting by the pool, staring at the water. No one else. Just her. For 15 minutes, watching nothing. Claudia felt like she was losing her mind. But then the security officer noticed something strange. He rewound the footage, pointed at the screen. "Look at the water," he said. The surface was rippling, wave patterns moving back and forth, like something was creating them. But the footage showed no swimmer, just unexplained disturbance in the water. Then he switched to the underwater camera, the one mounted on the pool floor for safety monitoring. And everyone in that security room went silent. The underwater footage showed something, a shape, moving through the water with impossible speed. Humanoid, but distorted. Long limbs, translucent skin. It swam in patterns. Perfect laps, back and forth. And every time it passed the camera, it turned its head, looked directly at the lens. Its eyes were massive, black, reflective, like deep sea fish. Its mouth opened and closed rhythmically. Gills. It had gills. The timestamp showed it had been in the pool for exactly 18 minutes. Then suddenly, it dove, straight down, through the pool floor. The footage glitched. When it cleared, the pool was empty. Security sealed the footage immediately, called the captain. Claudia was escorted back to her cabin and told not to discuss what she'd seen. The next morning, the pool was drained for emergency maintenance. Crew in hazmat suits scrubbed every surface. By afternoon, it was refilled. Passengers were told there'd been a chemical imbalance. Nothing to worry about. But Claudia noticed something. The crew wouldn't go near the water, not for the rest of the voyage. And at night, the pool deck was locked. Passengers were forbidden from swimming after 10 p.m. New policy, effective immediately. Claudia did some research when she got home. The ship's route had passed directly over the Mariana Trench, the deepest point on Earth, 7 miles down. An environment so extreme, scientists believe there are species down there we've never seen. Things that have evolved in total darkness, under crushing pressure. Things that shouldn't be able to survive anywhere else. But what if they could? What if something from that depth had been drawn to the surface, to the lights, to the movement, to the chlorinated water that mimicked its natural habitat? 3 other passengers came forward after the voyage. All reported the same thing. The midnight swimmer. Always at 2 a.m., always underwater, never surfacing. Security denied everything. Said the footage had been corrupted, deleted. No evidence remained. But Claudia had taken a photo of the security monitor with her phone. When marine biologists examined it, they couldn't identify the creature. The body structure didn't match any known species. The swimming pattern suggested intelligence. Purpose. It had been watching them, studying them. And when Claudia enhanced the image, she saw something that still keeps her awake at night. In the background of the underwater footage, beyond the pool edge, shapes, dozens of them, pressed against the glass, watching, waiting. Things from the deep that had followed the ship. Things that were still out there. Swimming in the dark, always at 2 a.m., always watching from below. Story 4. The engine room incident. Paolo's blood was everywhere. The gears had crushed his chest, but he was still breathing. Still conscious. Still whispering. Santiago knelt beside him, holding his hand, trying not to look at the machinery that had swallowed his coworker from the waist down. The engine room was deafening. Metal grinding, steam hissing. And Paolo kept saying the same thing over and over. It pushed me. It wanted me in the gears. It's been taking us one by one. But what happened next would haunt Santiago for the rest of his life. Santiago had been working maintenance on the cruise ship for 2 years. Night shifts mostly. Engine room duty. It was hot, loud, and dangerous work. But it paid well. That night, he'd been called down at 3 a.m. for an emergency. Unusual vibration in engine block C. When he arrived, he found Paolo already there, wedged between 2 massive rotating gears. The machinery couldn't be stopped without shutting down the entire ship. That would take hours. Hours Paolo didn't have. Santiago radioed for help, but all he could do was stay with his friend and wait. "Listen to me," Paolo gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. "It lives down here, in the machinery. We all know about it, but nobody talks about it. The old crew tried to warn us." Santiago thought Paolo was delirious from pain and shock. But then Paolo grabbed his shirt with surprising strength. "Check the logs. Check how many of us have died down here. It's not accidents. It's feeding." His grip loosened. His eyes rolled back. But he kept breathing. Kept suffering. Santiago pulled out his phone and started recording. He didn't know why. Maybe he needed proof. Maybe he needed to remember. But what his camera captured would later be analyzed by people who couldn't explain it. The audio recording picked up something underneath Paolo's voice. A sound that wasn't mechanical. Rhythmic breathing. Deep. Guttural. And then, clear as day, another voice. Not Paolo's. Not Santiago's. Something else. Whispering in a language that didn't sound human. When audio specialists later analyzed the recording, they found frequencies below normal human hearing range. Infrasound. The kind that causes primal fear. The kind that makes your body want to run even when your mind doesn't understand why. Medical finally arrived. They tried to stabilize Paolo, but he died before they could free him. It took 4 hours to dismantle enough machinery to remove his body. Santiago helped with the extraction. That's when he saw something that security later tried to make him forget. Paolo's body had marks. Deep scratches on his back, like something had grabbed him, pulled him toward the gears. The positioning was wrong too. Engineers couldn't figure out how he'd fallen that way. The angle didn't match any accidental scenario. It was like he'd been thrown. Santiago went back to his quarters and couldn't sleep. He thought about what Paolo had said, checked the crew records he had access to. The past 15 years, the ship had recorded 34 accidental deaths in the engine rooms. 34. The industry average for a ship this size was 2, maybe 3 over that time frame. He started reading the incident reports. Crushed by machinery, fell into turbines, scalded by steam, electrocuted. Every single one happened on the night shift. Every single one happened when the victim was alone. And every single report mentioned the same thing. Co-workers heard the victim screaming, not in pain, in terror, screaming about something they saw. But what changed everything was what he found in the archived reports from the 1990s. An engineer named Vincent had written a detailed account before he quit. He described something living in the engine room, something that had been there since the ship was built, maybe longer. He said it lived in the heat and steam, fed on the vibrations, the noise, the fear. It would appear in the corners of your vision, a shadow that moved wrong. And when you were alone, it would get closer, close enough to touch, close enough to whisper. Vincent said it had taken 3 men in his first year aboard. He'd tried reporting it, was labeled mentally unstable, put on psychiatric leave. He never went back to sea. Santiago kept working, but he was careful. Never went to the engine room alone. Always kept his phone recording. Always watched the shadows. 2 weeks later, another engineer disappeared. Just vanished during a night shift. They found his tools, his radio, his flashlight still on. But no body. Security searched for days. Nothing. The ship kept sailing. Another accident, another settlement, another family destroyed. And Santiago realized the company knew. They'd known for decades. The death rate was acceptable. Cheaper than dry docking the ship for a full investigation. Cheaper than admitting something was wrong. Santiago quit at the next port. Didn't give notice. Just walked off and never looked back. He tried telling people. Showed them the recording, the crew logs, the pattern of deaths. Nobody believed him. Maritime investigators said the audio was corrupted. The death statistics were within acceptable variance. The families of the dead were paid settlements with NDAs attached. The ship is still operating. Same engine room, same machinery, same thing living in the steam and shadows. But here's what keeps Santiago awake at night. Before Paulo died, in those final moments, he said something else. Something Santiago didn't include in any official report. Paulo looked past him, at something standing in the darkness behind Santiago. His eyes went wide, not with pain, with recognition. And he whispered, "It's here. It's always been here. And when you die down here, you don't leave. You become part of it. All of us are still down there, screaming in the machinery, forever. The ship still needs engineers. Turnover rate is 400% per year. New crew last an average of 11 weeks before quitting. Most won't say why. The ones who do all mention the same things. Footsteps in the steam, breathing in the machinery, shadows that move with purpose. And sometimes, late at night, when the engine room is at its loudest, you can hear voices. Dozens of them. Screaming, trapped, begging for help that will never come. The company calls it auditory hallucinations caused by industrial noise exposure. But the engineers know better. They know something down there is hungry, and it's been feeding for a very long time. Story 5. The Captain's Secret. Kenneth found the hidden manifest at 3 a.m. in a restricted storage room he shouldn't have been able to access. His hands shook as he photographed each page. These weren't supplies. These weren't standard cargo codes. His 20 years of naval experience told him exactly what he was looking at. Human cargo, names, ages, country of origin, destination ports, and next to each entry, a dollar amount. The captain wasn't just complicit. He was running the entire operation. But what Kenneth discovered next would cost him everything. Kenneth had boarded the transatlantic cruise as a passenger, not an investigator. Retirement trip. His wife had passed the year before, and he needed to get away. Clear his head. But old habits die hard. He noticed things other passengers didn't. The captain's erratic behavior. Course changes that made no sense. Middle-of-the-night stops in open water with no explanation. Crew meetings held in locked rooms. cargo loaded in the dead of night at ports where they weren't even scheduled to dock. Something was wrong, and Kenneth couldn't let it go. He started documenting everything: photos of unusual crew movements, screenshots of the ship's navigation system when he could access it, notes on timing and patterns. On the fifth night, he noticed something that changed everything. A section of the ship marked "Crew Only, Authorized Personnel" that seemed larger on the outside than it should be on the inside. He'd studied the ship's deck plans. The math didn't add up. There was hidden space. And at 2 a.m., when the corridors were empty, he decided to find out what was in there. He picked the lock, a skill he'd learned in the Navy. The door opened to a stairwell that wasn't on any passenger map. He descended 3 levels, found himself in a corridor with reinforced doors, small windows, and through those windows, he saw them. People. Dozens of them. Cramped in rooms barely large enough to stand. Men, women. Some looked like teenagers. They stared at him with hollow eyes. One woman pressed her hand against the glass, mouthed the word "help" over and over. Kenneth's blood ran cold. But what happened next put his life in immediate danger. He heard voices, crew members. Coming down the stairs, he ran deeper into the corridor. Found an office, unlocked. He ducked inside. The office belonged to the captain. And that's where he found the manifest, hidden in a false drawer, shipping records, financial ledgers, everything. The operation had been running for 8 years. 17 voyages. The captain had made over $12 million. Names of port officials who'd been paid off. Customs agents, Coast Guard officers. The corruption went all the way up. Kenneth photographed everything, uploaded the files to a cloud server, sent copies to his daughter with instructions to release them if anything happened to him. He tried to leave, but the crew was waiting. They'd seen him on security cameras. 4 men grabbed him, dragged him to the medical bay, sedated him. When he woke up, he was restrained to a bed. The captain stood over him, calm, almost sympathetic. "You shouldn't have gone down there, Kenneth," he said. "Now we have a problem." They kept him sedated for 3 days, labeled him paranoid schizophrenic, told other passengers he'd had a mental breakdown. When the ship docked, they transferred him directly to a psychiatric facility. His family was told he'd suffered a psychotic episode. The files he'd uploaded were dismissed as delusions, fabrications of a disturbed mind. Kenneth spent 6 months in that facility, heavily medicated. His daughter fought to get him released, hired lawyers. But every psychiatrist who evaluated him said the same thing. Paranoid delusions. No evidence of human trafficking, no hidden manifest. Just the confused ramblings of a man who couldn't accept his wife's death. They said he'd invented a conspiracy to give his life purpose. But what changed everything was what started happening 2 months after the voyage. Bodies began washing ashore. 3 different countries. Over a span of 4 months, 23 bodies total, all showing signs of prolonged captivity, malnutrition, dehydration, trauma consistent with being held in confined spaces. When authorities ran dental records and DNA, they matched names. Names that were on Kenneth's manifest. Names he'd photographed. Suddenly, his story wasn't so crazy anymore. Investigators reopened the case, requested access to the ship. But by then, it was too late. The captain had retired, quietly, transferred to a country with no extradition treaty. The crew had been rotated out, scattered across different vessels. The ship had been dry docked for renovations. The hidden compartments were gutted, rebuilt. Any evidence was gone. The cruise line paid out $40 million in settlements to the victims' families. All confidential, all with NDAs. No admission of guilt, no criminal charges. Kenneth was released from psychiatric care with an official diagnosis revision. Stress-induced acute psychosis, resolved. But everyone knew the truth. He'd been right. And they'd buried him to keep the secret. Kenneth lives alone now. His daughter visits when she can. He still has the files. Backed up in 7 different locations. Encrypted. He tried going public, sent them to journalists, news organizations, maritime authorities. Most ignored him. A few investigated but hit walls. Sources disappeared. Evidence was sealed. Witnesses recanted. The cruise industry is worth $50 billion a year. They have lawyers, connections, power. One man's testimony, even with evidence, wasn't enough to bring them down. But here's what Kenneth wants people to know. The ship is still operating. Different name now. Different route. But same company. Same infrastructure. Maritime investigators have flagged it 14 times in 3 years. No charges have ever been filed. Inspections always come back clean. Because they know when inspectors are coming. They clean up, hide the evidence, move the operation temporarily. And then, once the coast is clear, they start again. Kenneth estimates that over 200 people have been trafficked on that single vessel in the past decade. Most were never found. Their families still don't know what happened to them. And it's not just one ship. Kenneth believes there are dozens operating the same way, using cruise routes as cover, hiding in plain sight, moving human cargo across international waters where jurisdiction is murky and enforcement is nearly impossible. Kenneth gave me his files, everything he photographed that night. I verified what I can. The bodies that washed ashore are real. The manifest names match. The financial records show payments to officials who've since been quietly dismissed from their positions. The pattern is undeniable. This happened. It's still happening. And the people responsible are free. Wealthy, protected. Kenneth is 73 years old now. He says he doesn't have much time left. But before he goes, he wants the truth out there. He wants people to know what's really happening on some of these ships. Because the ocean is vast, the routes are endless. And when you're in international waters, the rules are different. Laws don't apply the same way. And some people have learned how to exploit that. They've learned that the middle of the ocean is the perfect place to hide. Because out there, no one can hear you scream. And no one is coming to save you. Story 6. The storm that wasn't. The fog was wrong. Dense, green-tinted, and it smelled like copper and ozone. Evelyn stood on her balcony watching it roll toward the ship like a living thing. The captain's voice came over the intercom, and for the first time in 5 days, she heard fear in his tone. All passengers return to your cabins immediately. This is not a drill. But by the time she turned to go inside, the fog had already swallowed the ship. And for the next 18 hours, they were somewhere else. Somewhere that wasn't quite Earth. It was supposed to be a routine South Pacific crossing. 7 days from Auckland to Fiji. Smooth sailing. Perfect weather. Evelyn had been documenting the trip on her phone. Sunset photos, ocean videos, typical vacation content. But on day 4, something changed. The ship's course shifted. She felt it. The angle was wrong. Other passengers noticed too. People started asking questions at dinner. The crew gave vague answers. Minor route adjustment. Weather patterns. Nothing to worry about. But that night, the fog came. Evelyn's phone captured the moment it hit. The footage shows normal ocean, clear sky, and then suddenly, the green fog rolling in from all directions at once. Not from one direction like natural fog. From everywhere. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Her breath became visible, and the ocean changed, The surface looked wrong, too smooth, too reflective, like liquid mercury instead of water. The waves stopped moving naturally. They pulsed, rhythmic, like breathing. Her clock read 11:47 p.m. She checked her watch. Same time. She decided to record everything. Some instinct told her she'd need proof later. The fog pressed against her balcony door. She could see shapes moving in it. Not quite solid, not quite transparent. Human-shaped but distorted. Wrong proportions. Too many limbs. She backed away from the glass. That's when the ship's power flickered. The lights went out for 3 seconds. When they came back on, her clock read 11:49 p.m. But her watch read 2:34 a.m. 3 hours had passed in 2 minutes. But what happened next made her question reality itself. She heard screaming, not from her floor, from somewhere else. Everywhere. She opened her cabin door. The hallway was empty but wrong. The carpet pattern was different. The cabin numbers were the same, but the doors looked older. Weathered. She walked to the elevator, pressed the button. When the doors opened, a woman stepped out. The woman looked exactly like Evelyn. Same clothes, same face. But her expression was different. Terrified. The woman grabbed Evelyn's shoulders. "Don't go on deck," she said. "Don't look at the water. It's not our water anymore." Then she ran down the hallway and disappeared around a corner. Evelyn stood frozen. She'd just seen herself, talked to herself. And somehow, she knew it was real. Other passengers reported similar experiences. A man claimed he walked into the dining hall and saw himself eating dinner. When he approached, the other version looked up, screamed, and vanished. A couple said they found their cabin occupied, by themselves, sleeping in their own bed. When they opened the door, both versions stared at each other for a full minute before the room went dark and the duplicates disappeared. The ship's crew was panicking. Radio was dead. GPS showed gibberish, coordinates that didn't exist. The compass spun continuously, never settling on any direction. Evelyn went to the observation deck despite the warning from her duplicate. She had to see, had to understand. What she saw made her legs give out. The ocean was full of ships, dozens of them, all cruise ships, all identical to theirs, arranged in a perfect circle, all facing inward. And in the center of the circle, the water was moving, spiraling, a massive whirlpool that glowed with the same green light as the fog. But it wasn't pulling them in. It was holding them, suspended. And around each ship, she could see people, passengers on the decks. But they weren't moving. They were frozen, like photographs. And when she looked closer, she realized they were duplicates. Hundreds of versions of the same passengers, all trapped, all staring at the whirlpool. The captain made another announcement. His voice was barely holding together. "Remain calm. Do not attempt to leave your cabins. We are experiencing a temporal anomaly. Time is not functioning normally. I repeat, time is not functioning normally." Evelyn checked her phone. The timestamp was glitching, jumping forward and backward. She had 47 videos recorded. She didn't remember recording most of them. She watched one. It showed her standing on the observation deck. But she was still in her cabin. The video was of something that hadn't happened yet, or had already happened, or was happening in another version of now. Her brain couldn't process it. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The fog lifted, the green light faded, the ocean returned to normal, the duplicate ships vanished, GPS came back online. But the coordinates made no sense. They were 400 miles southeast of where they should be. The ship's log showed only 2 hours had passed since the fog arrived. But every passenger's watch showed 18 hours. Phones showed 18 hours. Personal video timestamps showed 18 hours. The ship's clock and GPS disagreed with every other timepiece on board. Medical staff reported dozens of passengers with severe psychological distress, dissociation, false memories. Some claimed they'd lived multiple versions of the 18 hours, different conversations, different outcomes. One woman said she'd died, drowned, felt herself sinking into the green water. But then she was back in her cabin, alive, with no explanation. Another passenger showed his wife a video on his phone. It was footage of her funeral. Date stamps showed it was 3 years in the future. She was alive now. But in the video, he was placing flowers on her grave. And behind him, in the reflection of the gravestone, you could see the ship. The same ship. Still sailing in green fog. The cruise line quarantined all passengers when they finally docked. Medical evaluations, psychological assessments. They confiscated phones, deleted footage, said the files were corrupted, data loss due to electromagnetic interference. Evelyn had backed her videos to the cloud before they took her phone. When scientists analyzed them later, they found anomalies, timestamps that overlap, GPS coordinates that shift between frames, and in several videos, audio underneath the normal sound, voices speaking in reverse. When played forward, they're saying coordinates. Coordinates that point to an underwater canyon, a canyon that wasn't discovered until 6 months after the incident. A canyon so deep, it's never been fully explored. Depth readings just show error, like it goes on forever. Passengers who were on that voyage report ongoing effects. Time distortions, watches that run backward for exactly 18 seconds at random intervals. Déjà vu so strong it causes physical pain. Shared dreams. 7 passengers report having the exact same nightmare. They're back on the ship, in the fog, and they see themselves drowning in the green water. But when they wake up, they're wet. Their clothes are damp. Their hair smells like ocean, like they really were in the water. But they never left their beds. The ship never uses that route anymore. The company sealed the investigation, called it severe weather event with mass hysteria, paid settlements to passengers who signed NDAs. But maritime authorities quietly flagged the coordinates. Ships are now routed around that area. No official explanation given, just navigational hazard. But here's what they're not telling anyone. 3 months after the incident, a deep-sea research vessel was exploring the canyon. They sent a probe down. At 14,000 feet, it sent back footage before going offline. The footage shows something impossible. The probe's lights illuminated wreckage on the canyon floor. A ship, massive, broken, and on the hull, barely visible through decades of corrosion, a name. The name of Evelyn's ship. But that ship is still sailing, still operating, still carrying passengers. So how is it also at the bottom of a canyon that shouldn't exist? How can it be in 2 places at once? Unless the fog didn't take them somewhere else. It showed them somewhere else. A place where the ship had already sunk. A place where they'd already died. And for 18 hours, they existed in both realities at once. Alive and dead. Here and there. Now and then. And some part of them never left that fog. Some part of them is still out there, trapped in the green, sailing in circles, forever stuck in those 18 hours that never quite ended. Story 7. The photographer's last roll. Hugo stared at his laptop screen, scrolling through the photos from the cruise. Photo 1. Woman in the background by the pool. Photo 12. Same woman on a different deck. Photo 34. Behind him at dinner. Photo 67. Standing outside the theater. Photo 89. outside his cabin at midnight. Same clothes, same expression, same impossible face. He'd taken over 2,000 photos on the voyage. She appeared in 89 of them. But here's the problem. He'd checked the passenger manifest. All 2,847 faces. She wasn't there. And what happened next would end with Hugo disappearing completely. Hugo was a professional photographer. Travel photography, mostly. He'd been hired by the cruise line to document a luxury Mediterranean voyage. His job was simple. Capture the experience. Happy passengers. Beautiful sunsets. Elegant dining. Content they could use for marketing. He took his work seriously. Shot everything. Wide angles, close-ups, candid moments. Thousands of photos over 7 days. When he got back to his cabin each night, he'd do a quick review. Make sure he had good coverage. That's when he first noticed her. Day 3. He was reviewing pool deck shots. In the background of one photo, a woman stood perfectly still while everyone around her moved. Motion blur on every other person. But she was sharp, crystal clear, like she'd been perfectly frozen. He thought it was a lucky shot. Perfect timing. But then he saw her again. In a photo taken 3 hours later, different deck, same stance, same clothes, same neutral expression. He started looking through all his photos. She was in more than he'd realized. Always distant, always watching, always impossibly still. He became obsessed. Started taking photos specifically to see if she'd appear. Wide crowd shots, random angles. She showed up in roughly 4% of his photos. No pattern to when or where. Sometimes twice in 1 hour. Sometimes not for a full day. But always the same. Same dark dress. Same pale skin. Same expressionless face. He tried to approach her once. Saw her standing near the railing on deck 10. He walked toward her. She didn't move. Didn't acknowledge him. He got within 10 feet. Raised his camera. Took a photo. When he looked up from the viewfinder, she was gone. He checked the photo. She was there, but slightly closer to the camera than she'd been a second before. Like she'd moved toward him in the fraction of a second the shutter was open. Hugo asked other passengers, showed them photos on his camera. "Do you know this woman? Have you seen her?" Nobody recognized her. Crew members looked uncomfortable when he asked. One steward pulled him aside. "Stop asking about her," he said quietly. "Just stop." Hugo pressed for answers. The steward glanced around nervously. "She's been reported before. On other voyages. Different ships. Always in photos. Never in person. Security investigated once. They don't talk about what they found." Then he walked away. Wouldn't say another word. That night, Hugo created a timeline. Organized every photo she appeared in chronologically. The pattern was disturbing. She was getting closer. Photo 1, 50 feet away. Photo 23, 30 feet. Photo 45, 20 feet. Photo 67, 10 feet. Photo 89. She was standing directly outside his cabin door at 11:43 p.m. He'd taken that photo through his peephole. She was facing the door, staring directly at the lens. Her eyes were wrong. They didn't reflect light correctly. Like they absorbed it instead. Like looking into a void. He ran facial recognition software. Nothing. Age estimation algorithms glitched. They couldn't determine her age. The software kept throwing errors. He tried reverse image search. No matches anywhere online. He enhanced the photos. Zoomed in on her face. Her skin had no pores. No texture. Too smooth. Artificial. And in several photos, where she stood in direct sunlight, she cast no shadow. He went back through the photos again. Checked every single one. In 89 photos spanning 6 days across a multiple lighting conditions, she never cast a shadow. Not once. His last night aboard, Hugo posted to Instagram. a photo of her standing in a corridor. Caption: "Can anyone tell me who this woman is? She's been in 89 of my photos this week, but nobody on the ship knows her. She's not on the passenger manifest. If you see this, please DM me." Posted at 11:43 p.m. Within minutes, comments started flooding in, but they weren't helpful. They were warnings. "Delete this. Don't look for her. She finds people who see her. Stop before it's too late." His phone started glitching, apps crashing, screen flickering. Then someone knocked on his cabin door. He looked through the peephole. She was there, standing inches from the door, staring directly at him. He stumbled backward, heart hammering. Another knock, louder. He didn't open it. He called security instead, told them someone was outside his cabin harassing him. They arrived within 5 minutes, checked the hallway. Nobody there. They reviewed security footage. The camera showed his door, empty hallway. Nobody had been there. But Hugo had a photo, taken through the peephole. Time-stamped 11:47 p.m., 4 minutes after his Instagram post. The photo showed her, clear as day, standing at his door. Security escorted him back inside, told him to get some rest. They'd file a report. By morning, they'd have answers. But morning never came. For Hugo, at least. The ship docked at 6 a.m. Passengers disembarked. Hugo's cabin door was still locked from the inside. Security used a master key. The cabin was empty. His suitcase was there. His clothes, his camera equipment. But Hugo was gone. No signs of struggle. No indication he'd packed to leave. Just gone. His camera was on the bed. Memory card still inside. They checked the photos. The final photo was time-stamped 11:51 p.m. It showed his empty cabin, taken from near the door, after he'd called security, after they'd left. The angle suggested someone else had picked up his camera and taken the photo. But the cabin door had been locked from the inside. Nobody could have entered. Security analyzed the image, enhanced it, examined every pixel. And that's when they saw something that made them seal the investigation immediately. In the reflection of the cabin window, you could see 2 figures, Hugo and her, standing behind him. But frame-by-frame analysis of the photo's metadata revealed something impossible. The image showed signs of temporal distortion, like it had been taken over multiple seconds instead of a single shutter click. In the reflection, Hugo was fading, becoming translucent, and she was becoming more solid, like they were trading places, one becoming more real as the other became less. And in the final fraction of the exposure, Hugo was barely visible, just an outline, while she was completely solid, completely real, and smiling for the first time in any photo. The cruise line deleted Hugo's Instagram post, seized his camera and all equipment, contacted his family, said he'd disembarked early at a port, taken a water taxi to shore. They had no record of where he went after that. His family filed a missing persons report. Investigators found nothing, no passport scans, no credit card usage, no witnesses. He'd simply vanished. But here's what they didn't tell his family. Hugo wasn't the first photographer to disappear from that ship. Over 8 years, 3 professional photographers had been hired for promotional shoots. All 3 vanished. All 3 had reported seeing a woman who wasn't on the manifest. All 3 had documented her in photos. And all 3 were never seen again. Hugo's brother managed to retrieve some of his backed-up photos before the cruise line scrubbed everything. He had them analyzed by digital forensics experts. They found something in the metadata, hidden data embedded in each photo where she appeared, coordinates, GPS locations. But the coordinates don't point to anywhere on Earth. They point to positions in deep ocean, miles below the surface, places where sunlight never reaches, places where nothing should be able to survive. And when oceanographers checked maritime records for those coordinates, they found something disturbing. Ships had disappeared in those locations. Dozens of them, over the past century, all without explanation, all without wreckage ever found. And in the few cases where survivors were rescued, they all reported the same thing. A woman on board, always in the background, always watching, always in the photos, but never really there. Until she was. Until she decided to be. And by then, it was too late. Hugo's camera was eventually returned to his family. But the memory card was missing, replaced with a blank one. His brother kept searching, kept investigating. 2 years later, he received a package. No return address. Inside was a memory card. The original. He loaded the photos. All 89 images of the woman were there. But there was one more. Photo 90, taken after Hugo disappeared. It showed a man standing on the deck of a cruise ship. Different ship, different voyage. And in the background, barely visible, Hugo, standing perfectly still. Same neutral expression, same impossible stillness, same void-like eyes. He'd become what she was. Another figure in the background, another face in the photos, another thing that appears to people who look too closely, another ghost trapped in the image, forever watching, forever waiting, forever hunting for someone to take his place. Story 8. The quarantine Raj watched his neighbor through the door crack and saw blood streaming from the man's eyes. Not tears, not crying, active hemorrhaging. Dark red rivers running down his face as his body convulsed on the cabin floor. This was day 3 of quarantine. The announcement had said food poisoning. But Raj had filmed everything. The hazmat suits, the body bags, the Coast Guard blockade. And what his footage captured would prove this was no outbreak of food poisoning. This was something far worse, something the government tried to bury. It started on day 4 of an Asian cruise route. Singapore to Hong Kong. Raj was traveling solo. Business trip that he'd extended into a vacation. First sign of trouble came at breakfast. 3 passengers collapsed in the dining hall. Violent seizures, vomiting blood. Medical staff rushed them away. By lunch, the intercom crackled to life. All passengers return to your cabins immediately. Do not leave for any reason. Meals will be delivered. This is a mandatory quarantine. We are working to identify the source of contamination. Raj grabbed his phone and started recording. Journalist instinct. Document everything. Within hours, the ship became a floating prison. Passengers confined to cabins. No information, no updates. Just the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Doors opening and closing, and screaming. So much screaming. Raj positioned himself near his door, filming through the crack, watching. The crew members walking past were in full hazmat suits. Not the basic protective equipment for food poisoning, full containment protocol. The kind used for biological threats, the kind used when something is lethal and highly contagious. But what he saw next made him realize this was even worse than he thought. They were removing bodies, black bags on stretchers. Raj started counting, 1, 3, 7. By the end of day 1, he'd counted 14 body bags. By day 2, 23. By day 3, 47. And those were just the ones he could see from his limited vantage point. The official announcement kept saying the same thing. Minor outbreak, isolated cases, everyone will be fine. But Raj watched them remove 47 bodies. He documented the symptoms of passengers he could see through door gaps. Bleeding from eyes, ears, nose. Seizures so violent people broke their own bones. Memory loss? Some passengers forgot who they were, forgot how to speak, just stared blankly before collapsing. The ship tried to dock. 3 different ports, all refused entry. Coast Guard vessels surrounded them, kept them at sea. No one in, no one out. Raj's footage shows the blockade. Military ships maintaining distance. Helicopters circling but never landing. This wasn't a standard medical emergency. This was containment. The ship had become a hot zone. Whatever was killing passengers, the authorities didn't want it reaching land. And on day 5, something changed that made Raj realize they were all amao or expendable. His cabin neighbor started showing symptoms. The man had been fine that morning, knocked on the wall, their code for still alive. By afternoon, Raj heard him thrashing, screaming. He looked through the peephole into the hallway. The man had managed to open his door, was crawling into the corridor. Blood everywhere. Raj filmed it. The man was begging for help. Please, please, what's happening to me? His eyes were bleeding. His fingernails had fallen off. His skin was covered in dark lesions. Then the hazmat team arrived. They didn't help him. They didn't comfort him. They injected him with something. He went limp immediately. They bagged him. But Raj had recorded something crucial. The man's cabin number. He was documented alive. But what happened next exposed the entire cover-up. On day 7, the quarantine ended. No explanation. The captain announced they'd been cleared. Docking in 12 hours. Everyone would be tested before disembarking. Raj was tested. Negative for everything. They cleared him to leave. Before he left the ship, he checked the official records posted at the medical bay. Total casualties, 8 passengers. Cause, severe food poisoning from contaminated seafood. Raj's footage showed 47 body bags. He had documented his neighbor's death on video. But the official passenger list showed the man had disembarked normally at the previous port. He was listed as alive, never ill, never dead. They'd erased him. Raj tried going public, posted his footage online. Within 48 hours, every video was removed, flagged as misinformation. Fact-checkers labeled it manipulated media. His social media accounts were suspended. He received calls from lawyers, cruise line, government officials. They offered him money, a lot of money. Settlement for emotional distress during an unfortunate medical event. All he had to do was sign an NDA, admit the videos were edited for attention, apologize for spreading false information. He refused. That's when things got worse. His apartment was broken into. Nothing stolen. But his computer was accessed, files copied. His phone was cloned. He started receiving threats, anonymous messages. Drop this. You don't know what you're dealing with. People who push this story disappear. He went to the police. They took a report but did nothing. He went to journalists. Most wouldn't touch it. The few who investigated hit walls. Sources disappeared. Documents were sealed. The cruise line had powerful connections. But Raj had made copies, hidden the footage in multiple locations, sent it to trusted contacts with instructions to release if anything happened to him. Medical experts who viewed his footage identified symptoms consistent with experimental bioweapons. Hemorrhagic fever variants, neurological agents, things that aren't naturally occurring, things that are developed in labs. And here's what made it terrifying. The ship's route had passed through waters near military, testing zones, areas marked on maritime charts as restricted. The official explanation was naval exercises. But intelligence analysts have confirmed these zones are used for classified weapons testing. Biological, chemical, Things the public doesn't know about. Things that occasionally leak. And when they do, containment is the only option. Lock down the exposure site. Let it run its course. Clean up the evidence. Deny everything. Passengers who survived report ongoing health issues. Autoimmune disorders. Neurological problems. Memory gaps. Chronic pain. Over 200 passengers from that voyage have joined a class action lawsuit. The cruise line's insurance company paid out $240 million in medical settlements. None of it made mainstream news. The story was buried in business journals. Technical language. No mention of deaths, no mention of body bags. Just compensation for medical expenses related to onboard illness. But Raj has the footage, and he sent it to me before his settlement was finalized. Because he signed the NDA, he's legally prohibited from discussing it. But I'm not. What you need to understand is this. The ship was decommissioned 6 months after the incident, sold for scrap. But it wasn't dismantled normally. It was sunk, deliberately, in international waters. And hazmat protocols were used during the sinking. They didn't just sink a ship. They buried evidence. Evidence of what had infected those passengers. Evidence of where it came from. Evidence that would have exposed a weapons program that officially doesn't exist. The passengers who died were collateral damage, acceptable losses. And the survivors who got sick? They're still getting sick. Some have died since. Mysterious causes. Their autopsies are sealed. Their medical records are classified. And every time someone from that voyage dies, their family receives a payment, accompanied by a request not to pursue further investigation. Raj lives under a different name now. Different country. He says he can't stay in one place too long. Says he's seen people watching him, following him. He's 53 years old. Before the cruise, he was healthy. Now he has seizures, memory problems. His doctors can't explain it. But he knows. He was infected. Whatever killed those 47 people is still in his system. Dormant, maybe, or slow acting. He says he probably has a few years left, maybe less. But he wanted the truth out there before he's gone. Because this happened. It's documented. It's real. And the scariest part? That ship was decommissioned. But the testing zones are still active. Ships still pass through those waters. And occasionally, very occasionally, another cruise ship reports an outbreak, a quarantine, a few deaths. Food poisoning, they say. Contaminated water. Bad luck. But the survivors know better. They've seen the hazmat suits. They've heard the screams. They've watched the body bags. And they know that when you're hundreds of miles from land, trapped on a floating metal box, you're not a passenger. You're a test subject. And sometimes, the experiment goes wrong. And when it does, the only solution is to lock the doors. Let it run its course, and make sure nobody ever finds out what really happened. Story 9. The Ballroom at 3 a.m. The music was perfect. Big band jazz from another era. Simone stood in the doorway of the grand ballroom, watching couples glide across the floor in elegant formation. The men wore naval uniforms. The women, flowing dresses from the 1940s. She'd heard the music from her cabin, followed it through empty corridors, found the ballroom doors open, and stepped into something that shouldn't exist. But what happened in the next 5 minutes would make her question everything she understood about time, death, and the thin barrier between worlds. Simone was on a Norwegian fjords cruise, solo trip, celebrating her 40th birthday. She'd always had trouble sleeping on ships. The gentle rocking kept her awake. Night 3, around 2:47 a.m., she gave up trying to sleep. Decided to walk the ship. That's when she heard it. Jazz. Distant but clear. A full orchestra. She followed the sound to Deck 6, the Grand Ballroom. But the ballroom closed at midnight. Entertainment schedule was strict, no late-night events. Yet there it was, music, light spilling under the doors. And when she pushed them open, she found herself somewhere impossible. The ballroom was full. 50, maybe 60 couples, dancing in perfect synchronization. The decor was different, older, Art Deco styling. The lighting was warm, golden, not the modern LED setup she'd seen during the day. And everyone was dressed like they'd stepped out of a 1940s photograph. She stood frozen in the doorway. Nobody seemed to notice her. They danced, smiled, laughed silently under the music. It was beautiful, elegant, timeless. And then a man approached her. He wore a naval officer's uniform, dark hair, kind eyes. He extended his hand. "May I have this dance?" His voice was clear but distant, like hearing someone speak underwater. She should have run, should have left immediately. But something about the moment felt safe, peaceful. She took his hand. It was cold, ice cold, but his smile was warm. He led her to the floor. They danced. She wasn't a great dancer, but somehow her feet knew where to go. The music guided them. One song, then another. She lost track of time, lost track of everything except the movement. The music, the strange comfort of being held by someone who felt both present and absent at the same time. But then she looked at her watch, and everything shattered. 11:52 p.m. But that was impossible. She'd entered the ballroom at 2:47 a.m. She'd been dancing for what felt like an hour, maybe more. But according to her watch, only 5 minutes had passed. She looked up at her partner. He was fading, becoming translucent. His smile was sad now. "You should go," he whispered. "Before you can't." She stumbled backward. The entire ballroom was fading. The dancers were becoming transparent, see-through, like ghosts dissolving. The music began to distort, slowing down, warping. She ran for the doors, burst into the hallway, spun around. The ballroom was dark, empty, lights off. The doors she'd just come through were chained shut. A sign read, "Closed for renovation." She stood there hyperventilating, pulled out her phone. The timestamp read 2:52 a.m., 5 minutes since she'd left her cabin. But her watch still read 11:52 p.m. She ran to her cabin, locked the door, sat on the bed shaking, tried to rationalize it. A dream, sleepwalking, hallucination. But her feet hurt. Her shoes were scuffed from dancing. And when she looked at her phone photos, there was one she didn't remember taking. A blurry shot of the ballroom. Couples dancing, translucent, fading. Timestamp, 2:51 a.m. She had been there. It had been real. But what happened the next morning made it even more disturbing. She went to guest services, asked about the ballroom. When had it been closed? The attendant looked confused. "The Grand Ballroom has been open every night. We have dancing until midnight." Simone insisted. "No, last night it was chained. There was a renovation sign." The attendant pulled up maintenance records. No renovation scheduled, no closure. The ballroom was fully operational. Simone asked to see it. They walked there together. The ballroom looked nothing like what she'd seen. Modern lighting, contemporary decor, no Art Deco styling, no 1940s elegance, just a standard cruise ship ballroom. "Are you feeling all right?" the attendant asked. Simone said she was fine, but she wasn't. That afternoon, she went to the ship's library, started researching. The ship was relatively new, built in 2012. But it had a sister ship, an older vessel, MS Gloriana, built in 1941. The Gloriana had sailed the same Norwegian routes during World War II, operated as a transport ship, military personnel, families, evacuees. On April 17, 1943, the Gloriana hit a mine, sank in 12 minutes. 200 people were aboard. Most made it to lifeboats. Bodies were recovered, except for 89 passengers. They were in the Grand Ballroom, having a dance. A final moment of normalcy before reaching port. When the mine hit, water rushed in. The ballroom section sank fastest. Trapped, everyone in that room drowned. None of those bodies were ever recovered. That section of the wreck was never found. Simone checked the date, April 17th, the same date, 80 years later. She checked her watch, still frozen at 11:52 p.m. The time the mine hit, the time the music stopped, the time everyone in that ballroom died. But here's what made her blood run cold. She researched the naval officer who'd asked her to dance, described him to the ship's historian. Dark hair, kind eyes, officer's uniform. The historian showed her a photograph from the Gloriana's final voyage, a passenger list with photos. There he was, Lieutenant Henrik Sorensen, age 29, traveling with his fiancée. They were engaged to be married, wedding scheduled for April 19th. 2 days after they were supposed to dock, they never made it. He drowned in the ballroom, still in his uniform, still dancing, still waiting for a wedding that never came. Simone wasn't the only one. She started asking other passengers quietly, carefully. 3 others admitted to similar experiences. Hearing music late at night, finding the ballroom open, dancing with people dressed in old-fashioned clothing. All reported the same time distortion, hours feeling like minutes, watches stopping. And all had danced on April 17th, the anniversary. Other passengers on different dates reported nothing unusual. But on that specific date, every year, people reported the experience. The ship's crew knew. The historian admitted it quietly. "We don't advertise it," she said. "Most people don't experience it. Those who do, we ask them not to talk about it. Bad for business." But the historian showed Simone something else. A logbook, dating back to 2014. 2 years after the new ship launched, passengers reporting music at night, sightings of people in 1940s clothing. And here's the disturbing part. The new ship was built using salvaged materials, parts from decommissioned vessels, including the Gloriana's sister ship. Same design, same layout, some original fittings and fixtures, same ballroom dimensions. They'd essentially recreated the Gloriana. And something came with it. Something that remembered April 17th, 1943. Something that was still dancing, still celebrating, still trapped in those final moments before the water rushed in, still waiting for the wedding that never happened, still refusing to believe they were dead. Simone's watch started working again 3 days later. Suddenly, no explanation, just started ticking forward from 11:52 p.m. like nothing had happened. But she has the photo, the blurry image of translucent dancers, and she has the memory, the feeling of Henrik's cold hand, his sad smile, his final words. "Before you can't." Before she couldn't leave. Before she became trapped like them, dancing forever in a moment that never ends. And now, every April 17th, she thinks about them. The 89 passengers who never left the ballroom, who are still there, still dancing, still hoping that this time, when the song ends, they'll be able to walk off the floor, walk back to their cabins, wake up the next morning, dock at port, attend a wedding, live the lives they were supposed to live. But the song never ends. The dance continues. And every year, on that date, the ballroom opens. The music plays, and if you're unlucky enough to find it, you might dance too. And when you check your watch, you'll see it's 11:52 p.m., and it will stay 11:52 p.m. Forever frozen, forever waiting, forever dancing with ghosts who don't know they're dead. Story 10. The Lifeboat Drill. Yuki ran toward Station 7 as alarms blared through the ship. This wasn't a drill. Smoke filled the corridors. She could smell it. Acrid, chemical. Fire in the galley spreading fast. Passengers screamed, pushed, trampled each other trying to reach their assigned lifeboat stations. But when Yuki reached Station 7, she saw something that made her realize that they'd been lied to from the very beginning. The lifeboat was already full. Crew members were sealing it, and there were still 300 people waiting, 300 people with nowhere to go, because the ship didn't have enough lifeboats for everyone, and the crew knew it. They'd always known it. Day 1. Mandatory lifeboat drill. Every passenger required to attend. Yuki had gone to her assigned station. Station 7, lower deck, waited with dozens of other passengers while crew members demonstrated safety procedures. Life jacket, emergency exits, assembly points, standard protocol. But Yuki had noticed something. She counted. The lifeboat at Station 7 had capacity for 60 people, but over 100 passengers were assigned there. She asked a crew member about it. "Don't worry," he said with a smile. "This is just for the drill. In a real emergency, we have additional procedures." She'd believed him. That was her first mistake. Now, 4 days later, the real emergency was happening. Fire started in the galley during dinner service, spread to fuel lines. Explosions rocked the ship. Captain ordered evacuation. All passengers to lifeboat stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Yuki grabbed her life jacket, followed emergency lighting to Station 7. Hundreds of passengers converged on the lower decks. Chaos, panic, children crying, people shoving. And the crew was prioritizing. VIP deck first. Wealthy passengers, suite holders, premium cabin guests. The crew escorted them to the lifeboats while everyone else was told to wait. Remain calm, follow instructions. Your turn is coming. But Yuki saw what was really happening. Lifeboats were launching half empty, reserved for upper deck passengers, while lower deck passengers, the ones who'd paid budget fares, were being held back, locked behind emergency gates. For safety, crew members said, to prevent overcrowding. But it was a lie. It was class warfare. It was a calculation. Not everyone would survive. And the company had decided who was worth saving. The people who'd paid more. The people whose deaths would cost more in lawsuits. The people who mattered. But what happened next would expose just how deep the negligence went. Station 7's lifeboat launched with 43 passengers. Capacity 60. But over 200 people were still waiting at that station. Assigned there. Told that was their emergency meeting point. A crew member announced the next available lifeboat was Station 9. 2 decks up, passengers ran, fought their way through smoke-filled corridors. Yuki made it to the stairs, but the ship was listing, tilting heavily to starboard. Water was coming in faster than the pumps could handle. She could feel it. The ship was going down. They had minutes, maybe less. She reached Station 9. The lifeboat was gone, already launched. She ran to Station 11, also gone. Panic set in. Real panic. The kind that makes you realize you're going to die. She looked over the railing, saw lifeboats in the water below, rowing away, getting distance from the sinking ship. Some were full, many weren't, and crew members were still on board. But they weren't helping passengers. They were abandoning ship themselves, using crew-only lifeboats, leaving everyone else behind. But Yuki refused to die. She ran, found a ventilation shaft, maintenance access she'd seen during a wrong turn earlier in the voyage. She climbed, hands bleeding, lungs burning from smoke inhalation, pulled herself up 2 decks, emerged on an upper deck, found a lifeboat station. Crew tried to push her back. "This station is full." She fought, screaming. "I'm assigned to 7. There's no boat. Let me on." Other passengers joined her, rushing the crew, overwhelming them. They forced their way onto a lifeboat. It launched, overcrowded, dangerous, but alive. As they rowed away, Yuki looked back at the ship. She could see people, dozens of them, trapped on lower decks, screaming for help, waving, jumping into the water. The ship tilted further, water rushed in, and then it was gone. Sank in less than 10 minutes from the time she'd gotten on the lifeboat. Coast Guard arrived. Rescue operations. Survivors were pulled from the water, counted, processed. Official report, 8 casualties. Tragic accident, electrical fire. Crew acted heroically. All safety protocols followed. Yuki sat in the rescue vessel, numb, 8 casualties. She'd seen more than 8 people trapped on the lower decks alone. She'd watched them go down with the ship. She started asking other survivors, comparing notes. 23 people were unaccounted for. Names on the passenger manifest who weren't among the survivors. But the official count said 8. But what she discovered next made her realize the truth was being actively suppressed. She testified to maritime investigators, told them about the lifeboat capacity issues, the locked emergency gates, the crew prioritizing wealthy passengers. The investigator took notes, seemed concerned, but 2 weeks later, the report was released. Procedural error. Crew acted within standard protocols. Lifeboat capacity was adequate. Casualties resulted from passengers failing to follow instructions. It was a lie. A complete fabrication. Yuki had evidence. Photos she'd taken during the drill, showing overcrowded stations, video from the evacuation, screaming passengers being held back. She submitted everything. None of it made it into the official report. The cruise line offered settlements, survivors, families of the deceased, generous amounts. But NDAs attached. Sign and receive payment. Refuse and get nothing. Most signed. They needed the money, needed closure. Yuki refused. She went public, tried to. News organizations wouldn't touch it. Legal threatened them with lawsuits, defamation. The cruise industry has powerful lawyers, deep pockets. They buried the story. But maritime safety advocates kept investigating. And what they found was damning. The lifeboat capacity issue had been documented in 14 prior inspections, over 6 years. Every inspection noted the same problem. Maximum passenger load exceeded lifeboat capacity by 40%. Recommendations made. Retrofit required. But the cruise line never complied. Why? Because retrofitting would cost millions. Dry docking the ship, installing new lifeboats, lost revenue during downtime. And statistically, full evacuations were rare. The odds of needing every lifeboat were low. So they calculated. Decided that occasional lawsuits and settlements were cheaper than fixing the problem. They'd done the math. And they'd decided that some passengers were acceptable losses. But here's what makes it truly evil. The passenger assignments weren't random. Lower-income passengers were assigned to stations with the worst capacity ratios. Stations on lower decks, harder to reach, easier to cut off during emergencies. While premium passengers were assigned to upper deck stations. Better lifeboat access, higher survival probability. It was built into the system, a feature, not a bug. The company had created a hierarchy of survival, and they'd done it deliberately, because they knew that if a disaster happened, the wealthy would sue harder, fight longer, get more media attention. So those were the lives they prioritized. The others? Collateral damage, acceptable risk. Another line item in the liability budget. That cruise line still operates. The ship that sank was declared a total loss. Insurance paid out. But the company owns 18 other vessels, all with the same design, same capacity issues, same emergency protocols. Maritime authorities have flagged it repeatedly. Recommendations made. Regulations proposed. But cruise ships operate in international waters. Jurisdiction is complicated. Enforcement is difficult. And the industry has powerful lobbies. Politicians, connections. They've blocked every attempt at reform. Because reform costs money. And money is what matters. Not lives, not safety, just profit. And as long as settlements are cheaper than compliance, nothing will change. Yuki still has nightmares. She sees the faces of the people she left behind, trapped on the lower decks, watching the lifeboats row away, knowing they'd been abandoned, that their lives were worth less, that they'd been calculated as expendable. She's 47 now. The incident happened 9 years ago. She still advocates for maritime safety reform, still fights. But she knows the truth. Nothing will change until a disaster so large, so public happens that they can't bury it. Until hundreds die instead of dozens. Until cameras catch everything. Until the world is forced to see what she saw. That when you board a cruise ship, you're trusting a company with your life. And that company has already calculated what your life is worth. They've already decided if you're worth saving. And if you paid for a budget cabin, if you're on a lower deck, if you're in the wrong place when disaster strikes, you're not part of the survival plan. You're part of the acceptable loss column. And when the alarms sound and the ship is going down, you'll realize the truth too late. The lifeboats were never meant for everyone. They were only meant for some, and you weren't one of them. Story 11. The Vanishing Newlyweds. Marcus sat in the interrogation room changing his story for the third time. First version: she went to get ice and never came back. Second version: she said she felt sick and went to the medical bay. Third version: I don't remember, I was drunk, maybe she left me. The security officer stared at him, didn't blink, because the footage told a different story. Natalie had entered their cabin at 9:47 p.m. She never left, but Marcus left at 11:30 p.m. and returned at 2:15 a.m. alone. And when he reported her missing, he had scratches on his arms and blood under his fingernails. Blood that wasn't his. They'd boarded the Caribbean cruise 3 days earlier. Honeymoon, 2 weeks married, Instagram perfect, photos of them laughing, kissing on the deck, champagne toasts, #blessed, #paradise. But the cabin steward noticed something odd. The Do Not Disturb sign stayed on their door for over 48 hours. They never attended meals, never joined activities, never left their cabin. On the third day, the steward knocked. Needed to clean. No answer. He knocked again. Finally, Marcus opened the door. Disheveled, confused, eyes bloodshot. "Where's your wife?" the steward asked. Marcus looked around the cabin like he'd forgotten she existed. "She went to get ice, hours ago. I don't know where she is." Security was called immediately. Standard procedure for missing passengers. They searched the cabin. Natalie's belongings were there. Suitcase, clothes, passport, phone, wallet, everything. Like she'd stepped out for a moment and planned to return. But she was gone. Security reviewed footage. Cameras covered every major corridor, every elevator, every exit. The footage showed Natalie entering cabin 847 at 9:47 p.m. the night before. She never left. Not through the door, not through any camera angle. She'd vanished from inside a locked cabin. But what security found next made them realize this wasn't a disappearance. It was a crime scene. They searched more thoroughly. Luminol test in the bathroom. The drain lit up like a constellation. Blood, a lot of it. Recently cleaned but impossible to fully remove. More blood traces on the shower floor, the walls. Attempts had been made to scrub it away. But blood doesn't disappear. It just hides. They confronted Marcus. He claimed ignorance. I don't know what that is. Maybe she cut herself shaving. But the amount of blood suggested something far worse. They checked her belongings, found her suitcase packed, neatly, deliberately, like she'd been planning to leave. But his suitcase was still unpacked, clothes scattered everywhere, like only one of them had been preparing for something. Then investigators found Marcus's phone. He'd deleted his browser history, but nothing is ever truly deleted. Forensics recovered it. Search history from 2 weeks before the cruise. How long does it take to drown? Ocean current patterns, Caribbean. Cruise ship surveillance blind spots. International waters jurisdiction. How long before a missing person is declared dead? All deleted, all recovered. And then they found the life insurance policy. $2 million on Natalie, taken out 3 weeks before the wedding. She'd signed it, thinking it was part of their wedding planning paperwork. Standard stuff. But the beneficiary was only Marcus. And the payout was double if death occurred during travel. They arrested him, brought him to the ship's holding area, questioned him for 6 hours. His story kept changing, contradicting, falling apart. But without a body, they had a problem. No body meant no definitive proof of death. No proof of death meant no murder charge. Just suspicion. Just circumstantial evidence. And cruise ships operate in international waters. Jurisdiction is complicated. Which country prosecutes? Where did the crime occur? When? They held him for 48 hours, then released him. Insufficient evidence. The ship docked. He walked off. Free. But what investigators discovered next revealed the full scope of his planning. Another woman had been on the ship. Different cabin. Different deck. But security footage showed them together. Multiple times. While Natalie was missing, Marcus had been with this woman. They'd been photographed having drinks, laughing, his arm around her. Timestamps showed this was hours after he'd reported Natalie missing. Hours after his wife had vanished. And he was on a date. Background check revealed he'd been having an affair for 6 months. The other woman knew about Natalie, knew about the wedding. She was fine with it. Because she knew about the insurance policy too. They'd been planning this together. But here's what made it absolutely clear: this was murder. Natalie's family hired private investigators, dug deeper, found Marcus's financial records. He was drowning in debt, gambling, bad investments. He owed over $300,000. Loan sharks, dangerous people. He'd married Natalie knowing she came from a wealthy family, knowing she'd recently inherited money from her grandfather. But the inheritance was in a trust. He couldn't access it unless something happened to her. So he'd taken out the insurance policy, planned a cruise, isolated her on a ship hundreds of miles from help, in a cabin with minimal surveillance, in international waters where legal complications would delay investigation. He'd planned every detail. But the one thing he didn't plan for was technology. Natalie's phone was found in the cabin. Investigators cracked the password, found her final messages. Texts to her sister sent at 9:34 p.m. the night she disappeared. Something's wrong. Marcus is acting strange, keeps asking about my inheritance. I'm scared. Another text at 9:41 p.m. He's been drinking. He won't let me leave the cabin. If you don't hear from me by tomorrow, something's wrong. The messages were never delivered. Ship's internet was spotty. They were queued, waiting to send. But they proved she knew. She'd felt the danger, tried to reach out. But it was too late. And 6 minutes after that final text, security footage showed her entering the cabin for the last time. She never came out. The case went to trial. International jurisdiction battles, extradition fights, legal delays. Marcus hired expensive lawyers. They argued insufficient evidence. No body. No proof of death. Just a missing person. Could be alive somewhere. Could have jumped ship voluntarily. Could have fallen overboard accidentally. Anything was possible without remains. The prosecution presented everything: browser history, insurance policy, the affair, the financial motive, blood evidence, Natalie's final texts. But the judge ruled it wasn't enough. Without a body, reasonable doubt existed. Charges reduced, manslaughter possibility, insufficient evidence, case dismissed. Marcus walked out of the courthouse. Free. And legally, there was nothing anyone could do. He married the other woman 1 year later. Quiet ceremony, different state. They used Natalie's insurance payout for the down payment on a house. He collected $2 million for his wife's disappearance. And legally, it was his right. Because without a body, Natalie was only presumed dead after 7 years. But the insurance company paid out early. Settlements. Cheaper than fighting. Marcus and his new wife live comfortably now. He works remotely. They travel often. Post photos online, happy, smiling, living the life Natalie should have had. But 6 months after he was released, something washed ashore. Remains. Female. Found on a beach 400 miles from where the ship had been. Decomposed. Marine life had done significant damage. DNA was too degraded for conclusive identification. Dental records were partial matches, but not definitive. Could be Natalie. Could be someone else. Cause of death, undetermined. Could have drowned. Could have been dead before entering the water. No way to prove anything. The case was officially closed. Ruled as suspected accidental drowning of presumed victim. No charges refiled. Marcus never investigated again. And he knew that. He'd planned it perfectly, because ocean currents in that region travel northwest. Bodies that enter the water there drift for months, decompose, become unidentifiable. And by the time they surface, if they surface at all, evidence is gone. And without evidence, there's no crime. Just tragedy. Just accident. Just another person lost at sea. Natalie's family still fights, still searching for justice. But the system has failed them. Maritime law is complicated. International jurisdiction creates loopholes, and wealthy defendants can afford to exploit every single one. Marcus has never admitted guilt, never shown remorse. In one interview, he said, "I loved my wife. I miss her every day. What happened was a tragedy. But I've had to move on, build a new life. People should respect that." He collects the insurance, payments, lives in Natalie's dream house, drives her dream car, everything she'd wanted. He has it now, built on her death. And there's nothing anyone can do about it. Because here's the truth about cruise ship murders. They're almost impossible to prosecute. International waters mean jurisdiction fights. Evidence degrades at sea. Bodies disappear. Witnesses are scattered across different countries by the time investigations begin. And cruise lines prioritize reputation over justice. They settle. They pay. They make problems disappear. Just like passengers. Hundreds of people go missing from cruise ships every year. Most are ruled accidents, suicides, voluntary disappearances. Very few are investigated as homicides. Even fewer result in convictions. Because the ocean is the perfect place to commit murder. It's vast, it's deep, it swallows evidence, and it keeps secrets. Marcus knew that. He studied it, he planned it, and he got away with it. He's free, remarried, wealthy, happy. And Natalie is gone. Her family has a grave with no body, a memorial with no justice, and the knowledge that her husband murdered her and faced no consequences. Because he did the math, he calculated, and he was right. Sometimes the perfect crime isn't about not leaving evidence. It's about leaving it in a place where evidence doesn't matter, where laws don't reach, where justice can't follow. And for Marcus, that place was the middle of the ocean, on a cruise ship during a honeymoon, where his wife's screams were drowned out by the sound of waves, and her body was swallowed by the sea, and he sailed away, free, just like he planned, just like he always knew he would.